Hi there, everyone. Thank you so much for being here today. My name is Marcia. I'm the webinar director here at Advice Chaser. Before we introduce our guest and get started, I do need to do a little bit of legal housekeeping. Advice Chaser, the host of this webinar, is not a registered investment advisor. We cannot and do not give financial advice. Today's presentation is for educational purposes only and cannot be considered advice for any person's individual situation. Advice Chaser regularly hosts informative webinars such as this one, featuring a variety of knowledgeable professionals, many of whom are licensed advisors. Any opinions, ideas, jokes, or principles expressed by presenters are their own, and however true, funny, or interesting, are not endorsed by Advice Chaser. Please do not act on the information you hear today without consulting a qualified financial professional. And Leo, if you can move to the next slide. We are thrilled to bring in this educational presentation today, folks. Attendees are muted, but we do encourage you to ask questions using the chat box, and we will answer those questions during our question and answer section at the end of today's presentation. If we're not able to get to your question, go ahead and leave your contact information as well, and we'll make sure someone reaches out to you after today's event to address that question. Once again, we want this experience to be as educational as possible. Don't hesitate to ask for clarification or expansion of the material. Well, I'd love to introduce you to our presenter today. And Leo, if you can go ahead and move on to the next slide, we can see your bio picture there. Leo Wong is a fiduciary financial planner with Grant Vest Financial Group, specializing in new client acquisition and market research. Leo, the youngest of three boys, was born in Malaysia and immigrated to the United States at a young age. Leo and his family went on to successfully own and operate several restaurants throughout central New Jersey. Leo graduated from Christian Brothers Academy and Monmouth University with a BS in finance and currently resides in Monmouth County, New Jersey. About his reasons for becoming a financial advisor, Leo says, "My passion for becoming a financial advisor stemmed from the seeds that my parents planted when they came to America in the early 90s. As a restaurant entrepreneur, my parents worked 72 hours per week that provided food and shelter for the family over a decade. As grateful as I was for my parents instilling work ethic upon my siblings and I, they never developed a retirement nest egg for themselves. And as a first-generation immigrant, I can relate with those who work hard to provide for their family, but lack the knowledge or insight to plan for retirement. And that's why it brings me a sense of fulfillment when I'm able to help families plan for their future." And Leo, we're so excited to have you here. And I'm going to go ahead and turn over the time to you.
Thank you, Marcia. I just want to test the volume. Can you hear me okay over there? Excellent. So thank you for that wonderful introduction. And thank you for all the attendees today for participating. I am going to spend most of my time helping you understand your complicated federal retirement system. And as Marcia said earlier, it is a passion of mine to help folks that don't understand their retirement and how to navigate through it, because you only get to do it once, really, for most people. So luckily, I get to do this for a living, and I'm able to bring that value to everyone today. So my focus today will be your federal employee retirement programs and how it works together. And of course, there will be varying degrees of topics that I'll be going over today. Things that span from understanding your pension calculation. Now, for most of you, you will be under the new retirement system known as FERS. However, there might be a few of you out there that are still under the old retirement system called the CSRS. So I'll touch base on that as well today. The other thing that I will go into detail about is your Fegli, also known as your Federal Employee Group Life Insurance. I'm going to talk about what the cost is while you're working, but also, more importantly, what it looks like when you're retired, because that could be a very surprising unknown item that might cost you in retirement. And then, of course, I'm going to touch base about your Social Security, which is the second part of your retirement system next to your pension. And the third part would be your TSP. And so I'm going to cover that in terms of the funds, how they've done, and what you can do with it in retirement. And then, of course, I'll touch base about filing for retirement. The most popular platform for most federal agencies they use is called GRB, Government Retirement Benefits. However, depending on the different agency you're with, will also vary on the retirement filing program that they go through. And the last topic I'll touch base on is early retirement. With the COVID era that is here, a lot of people are evaluating the quality of life versus working the full retirement, full years they need for retirement. So I'll touch base on that if that is something that pertains to you as well. So first thing that we're going to dive into is the CSRS versus the FERS retirement pension programs. And the two programs that we have here, one of them started in 1983, which is the FERS, which would be a majority of the attendees here, if not all. And then prior to that was the old retirement system. So that's called CSRS. And these are the qualifiers that you need to meet to have a full immediate retirement eligibility. So to talk about the left side here, which is a CSRS, as you see, there's three sets of qualifiers you need to meet. I'm going to just talk about the first one because majority of people are going to meet the qualifications already. Because if you were one of the last class groups of the CSRS, that means you have 39 years of service minimum in this day and age, which means you're another 3 years out from your full maximum pension eligibility at 41 years and 11 months, which means you'll qualify at your 80% of high 3 average income years. And for those folks, as long as you're over 55, you already qualify, which is everyone under that program. The only downside to CSRS is that they don't have the 5% matching for the TSP, nor do they have Social Security. However, speaking to the majority, if not all, on this call today, for the FERS, there's 3 sets that you do need to meet to have a qualified retirement. So the first set starts with what's called MRA plus 30. So MRA is minimum retirement age, right? For most people, it's somewhere between 66 and some odd months to 56 and some odd months to 57 years of age, with 30 years, if not more, of service. Now, you must have the age and the years at the same time. You cannot have one or the other. And then the second qualifier under FERS would be age 60 years of service, with age 60 with 20 years of service, and then age 62 with 5 years of service. So for the FERS retirement, you also may or may not qualify for what's called a FERS supplement. Now, the FERS supplement, also known as a Social Security supplement, is the agency's way of giving you extra Social Security-like paycheck in addition to your pension if you have a qualified retirement before the age of 62. Now, it does end at 62 because at that point, you do qualify for Social Security if you want to turn that on in lieu of the FERS supplement. However, for folks that do retire after the age of 62, as long as you have over 20 years of service, you do not get the FERS supplement, but you do get a 10% pension increase in the calculation, which in my opinion is a lot better because that most of the time lasts longer as well. And for anyone that does have any military buyback time, that is included. They do include that into your years of service for qualification as well. Now, for the CSRS annuity, also known as the pension calculation, any additional years past 20 years of service would equate to basically a 2% increase towards your high 3 eligibility. So I did some shortcut numbers for you here on the right-hand side, but essentially, once you have 41 years and 11 months, you are maxed out at 80% of your high 3, plus any sick leave that you might have accrued as well that would be incorporated into your pension calculation. So for this example, this person has 30 years of service, which means they'll have 56.25% of their high 3, which in this case is 85,000, would result in $42,812 a year in their annual CSRS annuity, also known as pension. And they'll collect that for the rest of their lives, including cost of living adjustments.
And I believe you said 42, it was 47 on the total there. 47,812, not 42,812.
Thank you for catching that. Yes,
Yeah.
to clarify, 47,812. Thank you. And then for your FERS annuity, also known as your FERS supplement, it's a different set of calculation because they take into 3 factors in this scenario. The first factor is the years of service multiplied by your high 3 average income, multiplied by 1%. Now, for the high 3 average income, a common question I do get is it always calendar year? And the answer is no. It's actually any 3 consecutive years within your federal service, and it could be in the middle or towards the end of the year, as long as it's consecutive, meaning any 36 months. So it could be from June to June as well, as long as it's a 3-year stretch at the highest. But for this example, if this person has 30 years of service, multiplied by their high 3 income of $100,000 times 1%, you will have an annual pension eligibility of $30,000 a year, or roughly around $2,500 per month. However, as I mentioned before, if you're over the age of 62 and you have at least 20 years of service, instead of using a 1% multiplier, they are going to use a 1.1% multiplier, which effectively gives you a 10% increase in your overall pension. So when you multiply that with 1.1, you'll get $33,000 per year in FERS annuity, or roughly around $2,750 per month. Now, I will put a little asterisk to it as well, because there are additional provisions out there depending on different agencies that you work with. One of them being called the LEO provision, also known as the Law Enforcement Officer provision. So if that is pertainable to you, you actually get part of your pension calculation at 1.7% multiplier. Now, depending on the agency and the coverage that you have, it's called 6C. That may or may not apply to you. However, for a majority of civilian federal employees, this is the calculation that you will be using. So that was for the pension side, which is one of your retirement benefits. Let's talk about your Fegli, which stands for your Federal Employee Group Life Insurance. Now, for your Fegli, there are 4 components to your Fegli. The most common one is your basic. Now, everyone has basic by default when they become a federal employee, unless you specifically opted out during enrollment when you started with the agency. Now, how they calculate your basic is very simple. They take your annual income, round to nearest thousand, plus $2,000. So in this example, if you have an annual income of $99,600, it'll be rounded up to 100,000. And if you add 2,000, that will give you a death benefit of basic Fegli of $102,000. And how they calculate your premiums while you're working is simply by multiplying it by 16 cents for every $1,000, which results in a biweekly deduction of $16.32 for that $102,000 death benefit, which you'll pay while you're working. However, when you're retired, it's actually a different set of rules. So when you're retired, your basic Fegli jumps up quite dramatically. And the reason being is the cost for every $1,000 of life insurance goes up. Now, how much does it go up by? Well, if you retire before the age of 65, you pay $2.45 for every $1,000 of basic life insurance. And if you are after the age of 65, you pay $2.13 for every $1,000. So it could range anywhere in this example of $102,000 death benefit of $249.90 monthly to $217.26 monthly. Now, these premiums will be deducted from your pension, which means you're taking a haircut on your pension take-home pay. So you want to be conscious of this because it will affect your pension eligibility. Now, the positive thing with this is there is no underwriting required. So for folks that might not be in great health or don't qualify for health insurance in the private market, this might be your next best option. And then, of course, if you want to keep some of your basic, but not all of it, you can elect on your retirement paperwork to choose either 50 or 75% reduction for lower premiums. But that would also result in lower death benefits. So plan accordingly with this. For folks that plan on keeping life insurance going into retirement, a lot of folks start exploring outside life insurance policies in the private market, especially in their 50s and early 60s. So they know that they're locking in premiums that they could carry with them into retirement. Now, you also do have option A, B, and C as well. And these optional Feglis are something that you would have elected either during open enrollment or when you first started with the agency. Now, option A is a very simple $10,000 coverage. It was initially designed for just burial costs. Option B insures you up to anywhere from 1 to 5 times your annual salary. So for this example of the person that made $99,600, they would, if they had option B 5 times, they would pay, they would have an additional $500,000 in death benefits. Now, the downside with option B, along with A and C, is that the premiums go up every 5 years. So you do have to be careful of that as well. Most people end up dropping option B in the retirement because it eventually costs an arm and a leg because of their increasing rates that essentially start doubling every 5 years starting in their 50s. And lastly, you have option C as well, and that is family coverage. Now, that's only for insuring your spouse, and you could get a maximum of $25,000, and any dependent children under the age of 22. So with life insurance planning, make sure that you are reviewing what you need going into retirement. So this way, you know how the cost is going to affect you, because all these premiums are going to be deducted from your pension eligibility. So definitely review your benefit statement, your leave and earning statement to understand what you currently own, because you're going to have to make the decision of what you want to keep going into retirement as well. So that was with Fegli. Hopefully that gave you a nice understanding of the drawbacks and the financial costs associated with that, so you can plan accordingly. But the next part is your Social Security. Now, as long as you're under the FERS system, you do qualify for Social Security. And with Social Security, this is your second part of your retirement program, because you contribute 6.2% of your biweekly paycheck towards Social Security. So if you want to file for Social Security, the earliest you can file for is at age 62. Right. Now, I did mention earlier that for folks that have a qualified retirement before 62, you have what's called a FERS supplement. And they determine that FERS supplement by actually taking what you're eligible from Social Security at age 62 as part of the factor in determining that equation for you. However, when you are 62, majority of Americans do turn on Social Security. However, you'll be collecting a reduced benefit from Social Security. About 30% is reduced compared to what your full benefit is, which most people will be collecting between the age of 66 and odd months to 67 in this current time frame. And that stands for FRA, full retirement age. And that's when you get your full benefits. from Social Security with no reductions. And this is based on the year that you were born. And I'll show you what that looks like on the next slide here. And then for folks that are really happy and healthy and they're still working and they want to delay their Social Security, well, there are benefits to it. Each year you decide to delay collecting Social Security will increase your eligibility by 8% per year. Now the increase will stop at age 70. So the latest you ever want to turn on Social Security, age 70, because there's no added benefit to wait beyond that age. All right. Now I did make a little note here. If you were to delay filing for Social Security after age 65, you still do need to sign up for Medicare though. And that depends if you're still working or not, that you might either only need Medicare A, or you might also need B if you're retired already. But that would be a conversation for a different type of webinar. But for your full retirement age with Social Security, depending on the year you're born, will determine your full retirement age. So for folks that are born after 1955, which is a majority of people on this call at this point, they will have a full retirement age of 66 and some odd months. However, for majority of Americans moving forward, 1960 and later will result in a full retirement age of 67. Now for Social Security, one of the most common questions I do get is it taxable? And the answer is yes, absolutely. So it is taxed based on your combined income for the year. If you are single and your total income between your pension and Social Security is somewhere between 25 to 34,000, they'll tax only 50% of your Social Security benefits. And if you make over 34,000, they'll tax up to 85% of your Social Security benefits. And then of course, the numbers are adjusted accordingly for people that are filed married. But your Social Security is taxable if you are between those total combined income brackets. Now, for some folks, they also want to keep working and collect Social Security. And if that's you, be careful, because there are some restrictions that you have to understand. So for people that want to collect their Social Security before their full retirement age, so somewhere between age 62 to maybe up to 67, and you're still working a full-time income or part-time income, $1 is deducted for every benefit payment for every $2 you earn above the annual limit of $19,560. In other words, if you make over that $19,560 and you collect Social Security, for every $2 you make above that, they will reduce your Social Security benefit by $1. So be careful with that. Most people don't do this because it's going to negatively impact their Social Security. And it's actually worth it if they're still working to delay up to when they are also retired. And then of course you have certain folks that want to collect their Social Security at the year they turn their full retirement age and they're still working. And if that's the case, the numbers are tweaked a little bit higher to $51,960. And those only apply to the months leading up to when your full retirement age month is encountered. However, if you're over the age of full retirement age, which for majority is 67, beginning the next month, you could work as much as you want and have unlimited income and also collect your Social Security without any negative impact for your benefits. So that would be the ideal and best situation if that's the case, is to wait till your full retirement age, if possible, to collect Social Security, if not even delay it if you plan on working the years following. So that was with the Social Security part. Once again, the second part of your retirement, and hopefully it stays intact and unchanged leading into 2035. But the next part about your retirement is your TSP, also known as a thrift savings plan. It is equivalent to your 401k in the private sector. Now, your TSP is a wonderful thing to have because it is the only fund that you have, only part of your retirement that you have full control over, meaning how much you contribute and what funds you're invested in. It's going to make a world of difference by the time you retire. So make sure that you stay focused on that part of your retirement, because that's the only thing you can really control. Now, I want to dive into the funds and kind of educating you on what's been going on with the market and overall, because with the TSP, when you're young and working, it is one of the best platforms to have. But one of the downsides with the TSP is the limited funds that you have available. Now, if you look on the screen here, you have 5 funds essentially to invest in, and you have a combination of life cycle funds as well, which is essentially a combination of the 5 funds in varying degrees. But you can categorize these funds into 2 categories. The first category is with the G and the F fund. Now, the G stands for Government Security Fund, which you can't lose any money in because it's very much like a money market fund, but you also can't really make much either. And then you have the F fund, which is your fixed income fund. And that one is tied directly to bonds. And of course, throughout the years, it does pretty decent for a conservative fund. But as you notice in the year 2022, it's down quite a bit, 9.33%. And that's actually due to a rising interest rate environment. It has a negative correlation to pricing of bonds, which is why it's down so much this year. And will continue to be in that negative downtrend throughout the coming years as well because of rising interest rates. So for folks that want to be conservative within the TSP right now, you're absolutely getting destroyed with inflation right now. But unfortunately, those are the only conservative funds that you have within the TSP funds. And then, of course, you have the CSRS fund. C stands for Common Stock Index. It's kind of equivalent to S&P 500 in the market. The S is Small Cap Index, somewhat equivalent to the Russell 2000 Index. And then, of course, you have the I fund, which is international, which is equivalent to the International EFA Index. And across the board, as you see, we are down this year. This year is a very rough year that we're having right now to start off. And it's because of a lot of different reasons, but the primary headliners out there would be rising interest rates, inflation, as well as Russia and Ukraine war. So for people that are going to be invested long-term, growth is most likely the best opportunity to accrue and grow your TSP. And if that's the case, the C and the S fund is the most ideal funds right now because they're US domestic. And over the 10-year averages, you can still see that they're averaging anywhere from 13.68% to 11.25%. Okay. However, you also want to be careful because on the last row, I also show you what happened in 2008, where they had that huge market crash, right, in 2008. Now, obviously, no one has a magic crystal ball, what is going to happen moving forward, whether we do get into recession or not. But it is very opportune right now to definitely revisit your TSP and make sure you're allocated accordingly. I would also like to say that for folks that are going to be investing long-term, meaning you're not retiring anytime soon, over the next 10, 15, or 20 years, your growth funds are still the best place to be at, especially now when the markets are depressed. You're essentially buying the markets low now. So there's a lot of different suggestions and allocations I would recommend for all my federal employee clients, but that would really be subjective to what their needs are, how long they're going to be invested, and of course, what their financial objectives are. But some common questions that I would get is, what do I do with my TSP in retirement? So I wanted to take some time to cover that with you as well. So when you do retire, one of the options you can elect is to just leave your money in the TSP now. right? You don't have to touch it. It'll keep being invested in the funds that they're in. And you could also request a monthly payment, monthly withdrawal from your TSP if you want to take money to supplement your retirement, in addition to your pension and Social Security that you'll be collecting. So you tell them, send me $500, $1,000, $2,000 a month. They will do that indefinitely until you tell them otherwise. And they will withhold 20% for taxes mandatorily. And you get that every single month. And that's probably one of the more popular options for people. Now, there is a second option to take a look at, and that is to leave it in the TSP, but you could also purchase what's called an annuity with the TSP, also known as annuitizing. Now, what I mean by that is, if you ever looked at your TSP statement in the past, on the right, you should see a box with a picture that says, if you retire at 63, you can expect to receive this much per month for the rest of your life. Now, that number is predicated on the assumption that you are annuitizing your TSP, and annuitizing means you're giving up the principal of your TSP money in return for a monthly pension check for the rest of your life. So in this example is 1712. Now, that sounds like it's great. However, one of the downsides that people may not be educated about is that asset, once you annuitize it, is no longer yours. And there's no beneficiaries associated with a annuitized TSP. So that's why this option is not the best for a majority of people. So want to make sure that we're educating folks about that, because that's a option a lot of people consider, but they don't know the repercussions with that. So if you like to turn your TSP money into a pension-like return for the rest of your life, I always recommend my clients to do it outside of the TSP within the IRA platform versus staying within the TSP for that option. The next option that you do have, though, is to just leave the money in the TSP and just take lump sum withdrawals, whether in full or partial, meaning you could request $10,000, $20,000, $50,000 whenever you need the money, and use it accordingly as you wish. Now, I would never recommend my clients to take a full withdrawal, meaning cash out their TSP, even though it's very tempting for some, because some people think about wanting to pay their mortgage off, or help out their family with certain things and whatnot, buy an investment property. And the reason being you never want to take a lump sum withdrawal in full is if you have $200,000 or $300,000 plus in your TSP and you take out the full amount, that means you're going to give it taxed at the full amount, because that whatever is taken out in that given year is considered earned income. So you'd be at the highest tax bracket possible. So you never want to do that either. You want to definitely speak to a tax professional or your financial advisor in a strategy in taking money out of pre-tax accounts such as your TSP. And then the last option to explore is to roll it into an IRA. Now, an IRA stands for individual retirement account, very much like your TSP, but the biggest difference is an IRA is designed for anybody out there that wants a retirement account. But for the TSP, it's strictly just for federal employees. But in regards to the tax status, it's the same thing, where they are both tax deferred retirement accounts. So when you do roll over your TSP into an IRA, there is no taxable event because it all stays tax deferred. There's no penalties, there's no fees involved with it either. Now, you might ask, well, in that case, if it's the same thing in that regard, why do I want to do it? Well, you do it for the 3 reasons that's printed there, and that is for more control, more flexibility, but more options in terms of what you can invest in. As I mentioned before, one of the downsides with TSP is the limited investment options that you have. When you have in the funds in IRA, you can invest in anything. You can invest in stocks, bonds, mutual funds, commodities, real estate, annuities. The world is your oyster in terms of investment solutions. And that's why a lot of people do that. And in addition, they get to hire a financial professional to help them design that portfolio and manage it throughout the retirement career as well. Whereas if you leave it in the TSP, it's do it yourself. So you have to become the financial advisor for your retirement assets for the rest of your life. So different strokes for different folks. And that's why it's good to get the right education so you know what options are best suited for you moving forward. And for this slide, I want to talk about filing for retirement because there's actually a lot of confusion out there on how you go about doing it. And one of the most popular options for a lot of agencies that they use is what's called the GRB, also known as a Government Retirement Benefits Platform. Now, some of the agencies I could think of that use this are IRS agencies, VA hospitals, and even some Navy and Army installation civilian bases. And you would need to know how to use this because this is how they accept your retirement paperwork, is through this platform and given the directions on how to submit it. Okay. Now you should be able to talk to your HR on this type of information, but I want to make sure that you also get it from me. So this way, you know that there are resources out there, and this is one of them that you use to submit your retirement paperwork. Now, I do want to say in terms of retirement transition, you want to plan accordingly because there is what's called a pension delay going on right now due to the backup in the resources that are used to complete your retirement transition, specifically from OPM to your retirement agency to NFC. And right now, in this current juncture, you can expect probably anywhere from 2 to maybe as much as 3 or 4 months before you get your first interim pension check. So please plan accordingly. And your interim pension check is somewhere around 75% of whatever your eligible pension is, right? So it's going to take them additional maybe 2 to 3 months after that to then determine what your full pension check looks like, which then they will retroactively pay you for any differences that they missed. And of course, you'll continuously get your full pension check and of course, moving forward. You can also expect about 45-day window before you can get your cash out of annual leave as well. So that's been pretty standard. So NFC has been pretty good with that, paying out that annual leave, which kind of acts as a bridge for before you get your interim pension check. But I would recommend, in terms of the timeline before you file your retirement paperwork, 3 months is where the sweet spot is. If you try to go any earlier and file retirement paperwork and retire the following month, there are going to be delays there. So I would say 3 months prior to when your retirement date looks like is when you want to file your retirement paperwork to get the ball moving with your retirement agency to then coordinate with OPM and NFC to complete your retirement transition. Now, the last slide that I will cover with you would be early retirement. Now, this has been a hot topic for folks, especially during the pandemic, because they are starting to realize quality of life is greater than working the full years that they would need to have a eligible retirement. So for folks that want to consider early retirement, there is a different qualifier called MRA plus 10. So MRA plus 10 essentially means your minimum retirement age, which for majority of people is either 56 and odd months or age 57, with at least 10 years of service. So if you have those two qualifiers, you do qualify for an early retirement. However, there's a difference in different types of early retirement, and it could get pretty confusing also. And the verbiage is you can have things such as early versus deferred versus postponed retirement. Now, I'm going to just briefly touch on a few of these because it could get very confusing very quick. But if this is something that you really want to get more details about, I'm sure Marche can assist you later on after the webinar is over. However, for folks that want to have a deferred retirement, meaning that you at least worked for 5 years and you want to stop working until you turn the age of 62, you can turn on a pension still because you'll qualify under age 62 and 5 years of service. But that also means you give up all your benefits, no life insurance, no health insurance, and you only collect a very small pension when you become of age. Now, for some people that want to retire under MRA plus 10 and turn on their pension immediately, you need to have at least 10 years of service with a minimum retirement age, but you get penalized on your pension. And that is for every 5% that you retire before the age of 62, they'll reduce your pension by. So if you retire at 57, that means that's about 5 years prior to 62. That means 5 years times 5% is 25% reduction on the pension, but you do get to continue your health insurance and life insurance throughout retirement. Most people don't take that option because that's a huge haircut and you can't recover from that. And then for folks that want to do postpone retirement, well, you can, as long as you have the age and the years of service, MRA plus 10, you could just stop your employment and just turn on your pension at a later point in time. And that will also allow you to reinstate your health benefits as well as your life insurance. And there will not be any penalties with your pension there. So there's a lot of little tweaks and things that makes it very confusing. But this is why you talk to a financial professional that also specializes in the federal platform. But that concludes my webinar today, and I appreciate everyone that hung on through this whole time. I hope I made it enlightening and interactive enough for people to follow along. But I'm going to hand it back to Marche here.
All right, well, here comes some more interactive part, because we'd love to hear if we have some more questions. I do have a bunch that we've collected already. So I want to go ahead and tell people if they have any questions, they're welcome to put that in the chat and we'll try to address them as we go along here. All right. So here's the first question. You talked about Fegli, and someone had written that the death benefit doesn't seem to be very much. Is that why people go to the private insurance market?
Yes, they go into the private insurance market for two reasons. One would be they get to lock in a premium at their current age. So the younger you are, the cheaper the premiums are. And they don't have to worry about the increase in cost that happens when they do retire from the agency. So that's number one. And number two, if they need a larger death benefit as well, meaning more than what their annual income is, they could get it in the private market also. And I guess, you know what, maybe there's a third item. And I would say the third item would be if you only have the basic, but you want to enroll for more Fegli, meaning option B, where you can get extra 1 to 5 times your salary, you can only do it during open enrollment, which happens very randomly. And the last time that happened was fall of 2016. Or you have to have a life-changing event, which is a death, marriage, or having kids.
All right, here's another question. How do I make changes to where I'm investing? I have my investments in my TSP. How do I change that?
Very good question. So this is where they don't make it easy for you because there's actually two parts you have to look at. So if you want to change the fund allocation, meaning the GF, CS, and I, you can only do that on tsp.gov. A lot of people don't even log into their tsp.gov, let alone know that they could have access to it. But not only that, when you log in, there's two options that you get to do to move them around. One is called the intra-fund transfer, and the second one is called a contribution allocation, but they do two separate things. One is intra-fund transfer moves whatever money is already in the TSP to the respective funds that you want to be invested in, versus contribution allocation, will instruct the new money that comes in every pay period on what investment funds that it goes to at that juncture. So there's two separate things. So be careful of that. And then the other platform you have to use is whatever your employee webpage portal is, whether it's MyPay, whether it's EPP NFC, whether it's Employee Express. Different agencies have different ones, and they have to elect the TSP link, and that's where they could change what percentage or what dollar amount of their paycheck goes into the TSP. So two separate things, and you just want to be conscious of that.
Right, and we have a couple more TSP questions here. So when can you do a TSP rollover? You talked about it in retirement, but this person is asking, can you do it also before retirement?
Very good question on that. And the answer is yes. So there is essentially two times that you could roll over your TSP into an IRA. Number one, and the most common, is when you are working and you're over the age of 59 and a half. And TSP calls that the 59 and a half age-based withdrawal option, where you could roll over a portion or all of your TSP into the IRA and start working with a financial advisory team to design a proper investment portfolio for you. And then the other option is when you retire. Now, you could, as soon as you retire, you're eligible to roll over the TSP. That means for some people that are under Leo provision, could be as early as age 50. But for people that retire in the late 50s or early 50s, they can still roll over the TSP as long as they have as long as they're retired from the agency.
All right, and then one more TSP question here. Do TSPs have required minimum distributions like other retirement accounts?
Yes, they do. They have right now pushed it to age 72 with the Secure Act, but there is legislation going through right now that might push it to 73 soon. But right now, the current law is 72 would be the RMD age, where they'll start forcing you to start taking incremental percentages out each year throughout retirement, very much like any other retirement accounts like a 401 or IRA, and because Uncle Sam wants his tax money.
All right. Here's a question about early and deferred or postponed pension. They said, why would someone elect to do that? Is it because they're going to work in the private sector and want to turn on those benefits now?
Yeah, that's a good question. And there's a varying degree of reasons why people want to leave. The most common one I hear is they just don't like what they do anymore, right? The position is not what it used to be, and they just want to get out and do something else, so pursue a different career. But the other reason is some of them might have done very well financially for themselves outside of the federal agency in private investments or side businesses where they want to pursue their or redirect their energy towards those ventures versus continue to do what they've been doing. But it really varies from person to person on why. But it's kind of the same reasons though for the great resignation of the past 2 years. Right, a lot of people are exiting the job market in pursuit of their own businesses, or they just simply don't want to go back into the working environment that they have.
Well, thank you so much. That's about all the time we have for questions today. I want to thank you for putting in those good questions there. And if you have a question that we didn't have a chance to get to, or if you come up with one right now, go ahead and leave that in the chat, and we'll make sure to reach out to you after today's event to make sure that gets addressed. Well, I want to go ahead and thank Leo for being here. Let me pop his picture back up here again. I want to thank the organizations that have made this webinar possible today. For our attendees, look to your email soon with a link to a replay of this event, and you're welcome to share that replay with your friends and family. Here at Advice Chaser, we're all about helping you find a financial advisor who's a great fit for your life and your financial questions. Our matching service is free to you, and every one of our advisor partners has committed to offer a free initial consultation to anyone we introduce them to. Find out more by going to advicechaser.com and clicking on the link to find an advisor. Once again, from Advice Chaser, thank you so much for coming, and we'll see you at another webinar soon. Bye, everyone.